Hello and good morning to everyone who is joining us from Latin America, and good afternoon for the ones of you that are joining us from Europe for this webinar on mobility behavior change that is organized by the IURC Latin America. So before I start, I wanted to introduce myself shortly. My name is Aurélie Knecht. I am the project officer for the International Urban and Regional Cooperation Program, or IURC Latin America. For those who are unfamiliar with the program, it is a European Commission funded program that promotes the exchange of good practices in urban development and regional innovation. And it works with 24 cities and 20 regions in Latin America and in Europe. Please feel free to also present yourself in the chat and tell us where you are joining us from which cities and which country, and what's your name. Also, I wanted to remind you that the webinar comes with the simultaneous translation in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So you can choose the language of your choice at the bottom of your screen. So today's event will introduce mobility behavior change measures and initiatives to encourage citizens to adopt active and sustainable mobility patterns. We will explore the relevance of behavior change to broader sustainability strategies and also analyze related challenges and opportunities. So to understand these challenges better, we have the pleasure to be with an amazing panel of international experts that have extensive experience in mobility behavior change and in the promotion of sustainable mobility. So first we have Gonzalo Peon, who is the director of the Mexican office for the ITDP, the Institute of Transport and Development Policy. Gonzalo worked for more than 10 years on projects about governance, planning, transport, urban infrastructure, and political and environmental regulations. He has extended experience working with government, the private sector, and civil society organizations. His work has been highly relevant for the implementation of public policy, innovations, and the general climate change law in Mexico, and the road design manual for Mexican cities, amongst other contributions. Secondly, we also have Philip Näslund, who is the Strategic Development Officer for the city of Umea in Sweden. Philip specializes in climate neutrality and the management of cities' climate neutral strategies. He's an expert in circular and sharing economy and a political advisor for Climate Cities Contract, EU projects, other collaboration, and in education. His responsibilities include a contribution to EU missions for 100 climate neutral cities and the local Green Deal. Finally, we have our third panelist, who is Patricia Marani. She is a senior project manager in mobility for the municipality of Parma in Italy. Mrs. Patricia Marani is a senior project manager of EU-funded projects with more than 18 years of experience in the project design, the coordination, and the financial management of EU-funded projects. She contributed to various projects on sustainable mobility and also works as an expert for the evaluation of projects proposals. The agenda for today's webinar will begin with Gonzalo, who will introduce methodologies and examples of collaboration with the private sector to promote sustainable and active mobility. Then Philip Näslund will share Umea's experience in promoting non-motorized transportation through various initiatives and innovative campaigns. Finally, Patricia Marani will share Parma's experience with the Bike to Work program and the City Mobility Managers Network. After that, presentation will be followed by a 25 minutes question and answer session with a panel discussion. So if you have any questions for our panelists or any doubts, please write it in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer that after the presentations. Before we start, I'm reminding you again that we have interpretation in Spanish, English, and Portuguese, so you can choose your preferred language. And now I will leave the floor to the panelists so they can share their great contribution and presentations. So Gonzalo, if you want to start.
Thanks, Aurelie. I'll be using also a presentation to talk about a project. So I think you can now see it, right? Great. So this is a very interesting project for ITDP. ITDP is a civil society organization slash think tank that's very used to work with the government and not very used to work with the private sector. But here we try to do an experiment of how behavior change strategies can improve the mobility in the city. And we want to do at least 2 different experiments like this in different in parts of the city with different characteristics. This is the first one, and it's in Paseo de la Reforma, which for the ones of you that don't know Mexico City, it's probably the most emblematic street in the, well, not just the city, but the country. And it's an important cluster of businesses. We have the stock exchange there, the largest banks, and that type of work of work opportunities. But also it's the part of the city where the improvements for walking, cycling, and public transport are most notorious. Even because of that, we notice that many people still commute by car. So even though these like structural barriers that relate mostly to infrastructure and transport services are not as strong as in other parts of the city or other parts of Mexico. So we thought that maybe a strategy for behavior change could be interesting. Before going into the plan, which is the fourth point here of my presentation of today, just going to review very briefly about trouble demand management, which I think the literature speaks that private sector mobility plans or organizational mobility plans are part of this category of strategies to improve sustainable mobility. And what is a mobility plan? Then the methodology that we are proposing, including an example of the comprehensive diagnosis that we think it's a key part of, should be a key part of any mobility plan. And then the experiment that I have to say, it's not finished, but we are in the final steps of it. So I hope it is interesting, and that we can discuss where we are, and hope in the future we can even discuss results. So trouble demand management are policy instruments that change or affect the way people move, and there's like a huge array of strategies that encourage more sustainable travel choices or restrict less sustainable ones. Recently, I think this is a very recent article from a couple of months ago, academic article that ranked these strategies and put institutional mobility plans in the number 6 in order of its effectiveness. But I also here put it highlighted in green other strategies of travel demand management that are related to plans or can be part of a institutional mobility plan, like workplace parking fees, free public transport passes for employees, promotion of car sharing or carpooling, school mobility plans at city level, and gamification of sustainable mobility. I think all of these elements can be part or are related to a private sector mobility plan. So this is something that I want to highlight here. And so a mobility plan is a sustainable mobility strategy that helps manage travel and how trips from to and from work are made, and also promote alternative modes to the private car. And therefore, knowing the mobility patterns of the employees to quantify the impact these patterns produce to the institution and to society, and identify and facilitate the implementation of mobility solutions that may mitigate these negative effects. Another important or interesting thing about institutional mobility plans is that they can be developed for a single organization or institution, but also for a group of them located in the same area, like an employment cluster. And on the left side of my screen, you see this is Reforma. So this is the way the city looks on a Sunday when it's closed for bicycles and running. No, it's not always like that, but these are the type of buildings, the type of people that commute I think already shared with you. And their mobility plans can have like many strategies, individual ones like walking to work, cycling to works, collective ones that you can be related to public transport, but also and be public, but also private ones that are like van pooling, personnel transport, administrative that relate to flexible schedules, compressed weeks, other strategies, remote offices, other things that may not relate necessarily to mobility, but are like also some people call them like no mobility strategies, and also carpooling. And it's supposed to generate benefits to employees, so society and environment, and the companies. And I'm just going to mention some of these, like improve the quality of life and motivation of the employees, generate physical and mental health benefits, reduce travel times or improve the experience if that's not reduced. If they are big enough, they may even have impact on congestion. They do have impact on emission of polluting gases and reduce the noise pollution, and also it may reduce pollution-related diseases. And for companies, it is said, international experiences show that there can be an increase in productivity, savings on parking costs and other externalities of motorizations, increased talent retention and recruitment, increased uptime and purchasing power for employees, also improve the company's image. So like now that ESG, sorry for the translation of RSA, but it's related to what is called ESG, the environment, social, and governance. Now that's something that many companies are adopting as a sustainable and social strategy. And also, now that in the context of COVID, it can help to plan an orderly and safe and healthy return to work. So with this in mind, we viewed some methodologies from I have to say mostly European ones from the UK and France, and worked in this methodology of 5 steps with cross-cutting communication and behavior change strategies, and also looking for sustainability and expansion of the plan. And I have to say expansion because we are looking for a cluster, that there are more companies, not only the companies that we're working with, and we think that it is important to have this aggregation of origins and destinations of people, so that particularly collective strategies can be more effective. So first you have the planning part of it, and so businesses are not normally, it's not part of their of their business model to do a mobility plan. So they are not used to it. So you need to allocate some important time to it. And also if it is a collective one, to organize together and define the planning strategy with different organizations, mostly working with people from sustainability, if it's a big enough company, but also particularly with the human resources areas. Then do a comprehensive diagnostic that considers not only like the surveys that consider travel patterns or travel behavior, but also the perception of different modes. So we can start to understand the barriers and what the motivations for people to adopt a certain mode, develop a proposal based on this, on the traditional transport planning, but also considering these additions from behavioral sciences, then implement it, and then the fifth step is monitoring, evaluation, I would say improvement or learning, no? How it's refined, so it becomes some sort of a cycle and it can be sustained over time. So I think these are not like short-term projects if we want to work. So it has to be like some sort of combination of planning and action together in order to be something that's real and not just like having a paper that will sit on somebody's desk. Since this chat is about behavioral sciences, I had to put this slide here. So behavioral science tell us that in order to change behavior, it's important to understand the factors that influence it. And there are like different models to do this. For this project, we started with a Harvard model and changed to the COM-B model, which is a theoretical framework that proposes that for a person to behave in a certain way, the following is required, which is physical and physiological ability, physical and social opportunity. So it's not just the physical part. So like society influence how people decisions, and the need and desire to perform of that behavior on ourselves, but also on others. And there are like different factors that are related to this, like capacity. It can be like physical, mental knowledge and skills necessary to perform a certain behavior, like I don't know, like knowing how to ride a bike. Opportunity, so external factors that enable the behavior to be performed and include the physical, social, and environmental opportunity. So I think for this project, it's important that we have already protected cycle lanes, but also need to see like people who own a bike, if I'm giving this example of cycling, or where we live in relates to where we work. And the motivation, that's an internal process that influences people's decision making and behavior. And there are many things that affect it. One of them, like this example, is risk aversion. People can have people normally have different risk perceptions, and this is important. Particularly, there are very important gender gaps. Like for instance, in Mexico, there are like 5 times more men that cycle to work than women, or things like that. So this is also something important to take into account. And it's also important to see that resistance to change, it's normal. So if you want to introduce in a community change of behavior, you need to understand this and listen to the reasons of why people don't want to change, and have these recognition groups, because a large part of how we behave, it's defined by imitating what the majority does or what certain leaders of the group does. So in mobility plans, it's very important to identify these leaders of change and set example. In companies, in schools, there are very key leaders, and in companies, normally it's the bosses. So if the boss dressed like with suit and everything, probably even if it's not written, downwards, people will behave like that. So if the boss started riding a bike, it might have an effect on how other people move. So with your communication strategies and everything, you can use these, I would say, champions of mobility. So with this context, I'm going to tell you where we are at Reforma. So this project brings together 8 companies that have this like commitment to improve environment and physical health of their employees. All these companies are located in this employment cluster of Reforma, and we have around 14,000 employees there, and we I know 13,000 employees, and we got say 62% response rate of the questionnaire. So this was sent to everybody, and it is important because it even starts having people reflecting on how they move. And so we have like 7,000 responses, and these are the companies. We have a big telephone company, the stock exchange, and many big banks there. So we completed all these parts, and we are now in the process of implementing. Just to tell you about these mobility patterns and the profile of the people here, just a little over 50% of the people are men and 47% are women. Most people live in a radius between 10 and 20 kilometers from the office, and only 8.7 live within 3 kilometers. 8 out of 10 have a car, 4 out of 10 own a bicycle, 12% of the staff are users or are registered users of the bike share system in Mexico, which is called Ecobici. Car is the most used, in terms of mobility patterns, car is the most used mode, and your average occupancy rate, it's 1.4 persons. Say 6.5 out of 10 people own and use a car, 1.5 out of 10 own and use a bicycle. 48% travel more than 15 kilometers one way, so in the morning and at night, and 53% travel more than 1 hour, and 9% travel more than 2 hours to commute for work. So if you consider both commute to home as well, it's like 4 hours a day, and only like a very short number commute only to 2.6% of the people does it in 15 minutes or less. And what is important with these mobility patterns is also to translate that in interesting data for people that now care about the environment and for companies that care about the environment. So, 46% of people commute by car, so it's the most used mode, versus 38% of public transport. But 89.2% of CO2 emissions are produced by car trips and only 4.1% by public transport. In terms of CO2 and in particulate matter, which is a big thing in Mexico because our pollution, it's 72 versus 8.6. So, and it's also interesting to translate this in metrics that are more easy to understand to employees and to this social group. So we are saying that in order to offset carbon emissions for the commuting related emissions, more than 17,000 trees will need to be planted every year to offset this. And also, it is very important to identify the cost. So I think with this questionnaire, we also find like an average cost of commuting by car related to parking, fuel, and other things. So it's 5,000 pesos roughly, which is around $250, which is 1.4 times more expensive than some types of taxis, or ride-hailing applications, 10.3 times more expensive than public transport, and 27.8 more expensive than cycling. Also, we identified that the average cost of parking to the companies are 1,000 pesos, 1,050 pesos, which is just over $50 per month to every company, and that these are like 30% of car expenses. So with this data, that also included the perception of the perception of other modes, not the ones that people are using. We tried to generate a vision and objectives with people from every company, and so we define a group dynamic and set these different objectives in different areas of that a plan can do, and then we can work behind the scenes, not necessarily with the companies, to see how we can achieve these goals. So in car use, we defined a 20% modal share reduction of shift from car to sustainable modes, doubling the modal share of cycling, reduce CO2 emissions by 30%, and also, since we identify large proportions of subsidies to cars, particularly to parking, to shift 10% of this current car subsidy to sustainable modes. And so that's also a way where this plan can be funded. Not the planning part, that's partly sponsored by ITDP and the IDB, but by the same mobility strategy that the companies have been using before. And also we find this vision, which is, since probably because we have many people from human resources, it was key for them to improve employees' quality of life, also reduce congestion in the area and reduce polluting emissions, and doing this by promoting more sustainable mobility options. So even we have like these perceptions areas, we also found that we didn't have like enough to define the strategy. So we use again the COMBI model to combine with traditional transport planning to define mobility strategies in different groups: active mobility, public transport and public transport integration, so with cycling or carpooling and van pooling. This is important because we don't want to promote a plan that competes or affects public transport. So we thought that this was something that is important to have. And so we find 23 strategies that were presented to the company groups and to different types of people. And this is just an example. So we did different transport planning analysis to set strategies for cycling, carpooling. We defined routes for van pooling, etc., and created some scenarios. So this is the example of cycling. So there are this is our isochrones. So and they represent people that live the darker blue, people that live 30 minutes or less to their workspace, and the lighter blue 15 minutes or less, of course, cycling. And the perimeters in shaded greens are the perimeters where the bike share works, or the privately operated dockless bike share. And on the other side, we also have the protected cycle lanes, and with buffers around them. So if you can see the area, it's really well served by cycling infrastructure. And every dot, it's a person, and the color of the dot represents their preferred mode of transportation. So you see the red ones are people that commute by car but live really, really near. So we found out that these guys could even have savings in time, not only in cost, to come. So it was important to identify. So we identified 871 men and 724 women that could cycle in the optimistic scenario. So it also related on how they, not only where they live, these consider all people that live in this cycling distance, and this conservative scenario only consider people that have not that much risk aversion, the ones in the conservative scenario. So we identified in the being conservative that 774 new people commuting by cycling, representing 11% of the people that answered the questionnaire. So it would be like quite easy, even with a conservative scenario, to get to the objective of doubling the percentage of people that cycle to work. So we did that for all other options, and assess the feasibility of these strategies. So the ones highlighted in bolds are the ones that we selected. No, so from the long list that you are seeing here, we are only doing the ones in bold, like for walking or running. It's formation of running groups. For cycling, it's free or companies sponsoring bike share systems, the private one or the public one. Also, since, for instance, like women, so like their strongest barrier to change cycling was to identify secure routes. So we are also hiring people that go into secure routes, having this bike school and personalized cycling accompaniment, and develop cycle rides or events. No, like there's something that the companies propose, that like a day without a car, a year or a month. So that's also something. So with carpool, so we are installing a digital platform for car sharing, and also giving preferential parking spaces. And yeah, so some things about public transport related to its integration, and also creation of this collective or aggregated van pooling routes, because also part of the risk aversion in Mexico to these services are security. So in a closed environment, it looks that it can work. So I'm going to just finish, and sorry if I took too much time. I hope I didn't. So we want to solve these questions, and I hope I have interesting results in the future. So can an institutional mobility plan contribute to the sustainability and quality of life of cities? So it can be part, the aggregation of origins and destinations make collective transport solution viable or profitable. This is important. No? If you see like Lyft, the Ford sponsored van pooling, went to bankruptcy, and now they only do bike sharing. The largest ones in the US and in many places are going into bankruptcy. Even Uber, like van pooling with Uber, it's not working. So part of it is very difficult to define routes. And when they do work with companies working with a single one, it's not always make routes viable or profitable. So maybe this aggregation can help. Should an institutional mobility plan, how can an institutional mobility plan be sustained over time? Right now, companies are working together, but we serve as like a secretaries of a mobility committee. So does this have a life on its own? And also, should private sector mobility plans be promoted by authorities as part of urban sustainability solutions, and how? Like make it mandatory, or give tax discounts or something like that. So I hope that I learn also from my colleagues from other cities, and I also hope that we can discuss these questions afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. It was really interesting. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Felipe and Patricia are going to complement all these points that you mentioned. So Philippe, if you want to present now.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think I was glad when that behavior science came up. I think I will try to address that in some examples. I think that was really nice, Gonzalo, to introduce that. So I will just share my screen. Yeah, is it working?
Perfect.
I hope
Yes.
so. Yeah, perfect. So thank you very much for being here and for the possibility to introduce a bit of Umea's work on sustainable mobility and also really emphasize this on behavior change and what we have tried to do here. So I was just thinking to do a quick introduction really fast of the city of Umeå, just to get you a glimpse of that and how we try to plan the city for enable a sustainable mobility habit. And then I will go into some examples of how we have worked with communicative strategies and campaigning for enabling this for the citizens. So I will just try to guide you through that, and I think I will touch about some of the examples that was presented earlier as well. So so just to say that we are in the northern part of Sweden, and so we are in the right at the Arctic Circle. So we're the largest city in northern Sweden, and quite young city for the Swedish perspective, with 2 universities. So we have a lot of this kind of input of new ideas and also kind of a progressive city to work in. So it's really a good place to test new solutions. And just to say that I will talk today more of behavior change, but of course in the background we have implemented the infrastructure needed for electric public transport and with the buses, a lot of bicycling highways, etc. But now we are targeting more the how to make citizens also work with the behavior change of it. So I think for us, sustainable mobility is in the core of our growth in Umeå, and it has to also be equal, just transition for climate neutrality, and also safe and secure for the users and the residents. And just to stress this, that in Umea we have in our comprehensive planning for the city adopted some strategies to enable this transition towards sustainable mobility, and for us it's allowed to build a more dense city than, so it's not too spread out, and this is important to enable like public transport in an effective way for us, and also to promote sustainable options for bicycling and walking. And Umeå is also in a delta of a river, so it's quite flat actually, and in the surrounding in the northern Sweden is quite much mountain, so we have a nice position to support this kind of other ways of mobility than by car. So build this in a 5-kilometer city is one target, so it's easy to access all the districts. We are also kind of building as many cities, of course, in the public transport high routes, so it's easy to access public transport. But I also think this that everybody should take a part of this transition and be inclusive in this journey. So I will just address, I think we heard it before, but for us, we have done several in a long time now, service and understanding of who is taking part of our mobility system in what way, who does use the car more, who is on the buses, who is bicycling more or walking. And when we look at it and also integrate it with a gender perspective, we can see that if we would have the same amount of sustainable travel as the women does already, we will meet our first target in Umea, that is 65% sustainable travel in the city. And I think this is a lesson that we've learned, that we have to target different citizens group in different ways. So with this understanding, we can really emphasize our the understanding that, okay, we need to work with the male dominated workplaces where they are in the factories in the most parts, and like find out what is the driving force for their behavior of using the car more than other transport means as bus or bicycling. So so I think this is something we can all learn from, and really that we ask this kind of question of what is behind our choice of transport modes. So for this has been a really important like statistic for us to work with. And I will now, yes, that was just a short introduction. So now we'll try to just show you some example of what we are trying to do here, and that kind of maybe create an understanding. And yeah, this is just one example. This is a bus stop in Umea, and it was designed in a new way. It is designed maybe on the habits we have today, maybe in Sweden anyway, that nobody likes to be in a close corner. They all are standing around our bus stops, like spreading out in our cities. So we built this around that you can stand up and like just get a visual understanding of where you are, and all the buses have different lighting and sounds actually. So this was just to test out like our habits of using a bus stop, and you can put that into the city and see how the citizens are reacting to your test bed. So this was just one example of that. But we have done some, and today was asked also to talk about a bit more on campaigning and maybe how to interact with our citizens. So 2 years ago, we did this experiment of putting out car-free families to try out new habits. And the reason was that we didn't just want to say, okay, go from car to a bus. It was to understand how all our sustainable mobility systems are working together right now in Umea. So in this example, I think we targeted one of the most complex target groups you can have. It's families with kids at home. So they have a life puzzle to solve in an everyday life. They have to take kids to school, they have soccer practice, they will go to work, they will pick up the kids again from schools or preschools, and you know, getting this life puzzle to work. And how do you do that if you leave your car at home as they did? And this was kind of a small experiment. As you can see, it was 10 families for 3 months. But for us, it was, and we had a lot of interest. We have 170 families who just wanted to join in. So I think just that shows that there are some ambassadors out there in your city that you can work with, and they can promote this kind of lifestyles. So we gave them like access to the public transport system. In Umea, we have a electric cargo bike pool called U-Bike. So they got that. They got some carpool, and they also was provided with electric bikes at their home. And then they was having a researcher from the university here that was following them for 3 months, and they did a diary, like how is it working, what is the upsides, the downsides, and they got also connected to each other. So they started a community for this, and what we could see from this quite small experiment or testing, if you might say, sounds a bit better. It was that for us, we saw that 3 months was enough to change a behavior. So many of the families after these projects, they sold or left out one of their cars if they had two, or reduced it a lot, the use. And it was quite interesting that it was able to change, but they needed support. I mean, we had a researcher that was at their home and guiding them, you might say. They had each other, and that was to overcome some thresholds in their everyday lives and getting other to inspire them. And but it was interesting also that they said that it led to less stress, because when you do this kind of lifestyle, you might say, you have to plan and really plan your everyday life a bit better. So they had to like have a better schedule for the day, and that led to fewer impulse purchases and reduced consumption in general. And they also told us that this kind of electric bikes at home was the key for the car-free life. So we have some publication in English. It was a web page there, but this was just one example that you can really engage the citizens and they can become ambassadors. I will also share one example that was quite easy as well. We did for a municipality a quite at least in Sweden, a quite unique campaigning. We had something that didn't look like the municipality's communication style in the as we usually do it. You might say we call it a break free campaign. It was break free from your car, the car use. You don't need that. You can really live without a car and go by bike instead. And what we did here, what I wanted to stress with you, was that we worked with local culture workers. So we had some artists joining us that is well known in the city, and we also had our local, like in Sweden in Umea, it's a lot about ice hockey. So the ice hockey team was kind of in this campaigning to the citizens. And I think we heard it before that like who is the role model that can set an example, and we used and worked with cultural artists and or sport clubs, and that was really a success for us, and it's led to like increasing numbers of other citizens wanting to take their bike more often. So it was a small example, but you can really do this kind of working with local community and getting a result. And the last thing I wanted to share with you as an example, this is actually something we took home after a collaboration we do with the IURC Asia and in Kamakura, Japan, where we are connected to. And they had this thing that they had what you call it, a citizens festival for sustainability. So they had kind of a festival where citizens can join in and co-create ideas and solutions in their neighborhoods or in their everyday life, what they want to change. If they want a carpool, if they want to have more like bike fixing schemes or whatever, they co-created them themselves. And we brought this back to Umea and have launched our own. We call it Umecom. And we have this every month. We have people can just sign in and say, I have this idea that I want to try. Is someone willing to help me? And then we have some business developers. We have some other innovation structures that they can get support from. And then they co-create solutions and try to bring these ideas forward. And this is also just to emphasize that you can work with the citizens and they can bring in their ideas to life if we just support them. So this is also quite interesting examples that we are running right now every month, and we will also have a bigger festival in this summer. And just to say some concluding words from me, that you can really challenge this kind of who has power for their everyday life, their identity and norms, but it's really important that we work with behavior and like understanding of the norms the citizens is living in, and not just introducing new technologies or infrastructure. We need to do both, and I think this is quite cost effective as well. So last words, just to say, if you're interested, we will host a conference here in Umea this June, but it's also online, so you can look it up. It's about the gender landscape and gender equality and climate neutrality in cities and how we'll do that. And we are working with Urbact here in Europe. So if you're interested, please you can look this up on Google and whatever and sign in. You can be online. So we'll discuss this topic further. And with that, I say thank you.
Thank you so much, Philip. It was really interesting to see how Umea is working with the citizens and how the great relationship with the municipality and the citizen can promote more sustainable behavior, and like the use of bikes, electric bikes, and so on. So now we're gonna invite Patricia to present for the last presentation and complement all the great learnings that we have before the question section. So Patricia.
Thank you everybody. Thank you for inviting me and for giving the possibility to present the work we do in Parma. I try to share my presentation. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I will do a very short introduction of Parma, as Philip did for, and then I will present a couple of initiatives we have in Parma. So where Parma is located is in Italy, North Italy, in the region Emilia-Romagna, and the capital city of our region is Bologna. And Parma is a medium-sized city. It is a compact city with an historic center. The city was founded by the Romans, as many Italian cities. It is a flat city and a compact city. We are in the middle of a so-called food valley. Yes, we are famous for food, for parmesan, cheese, wine, ham. But this means a lot of traffic as well for freight, logistics, and industries linked to food. And Parma means also air pollution. Unfortunately, we are in one of the most polluted regions in Europe, the Po region, which encompasses 4 regions. And why it is one of the most polluted areas in Europe? Because of many reasons. Because of geography, it is a big plain surrounded by mountains. Because it is a densely populated area, and because it is very densely populated, even if agriculture is one of the main sectors, we have a lot of industry, big cities, many and small cities. And the main sources of pollution are traffic, industry, heating and air conditioning, and agriculture. So the challenge is very complex, and the solutions that we have to find to overcome the problems are complex, not simple but complex. So we are working in an integrated approach, which integrate strategies at national, regional, interregional, and local level, and strategies that integrate actions for air quality, sustainable mobility, and climate change, both at regional and also local level. Here you can see the logos of many European projects we participate or we have implemented on mobility, energy, sustainable issues, sustainable development. The starting point for us in terms of mobility is the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. We have been one of the first cities in Italy to approve the plan, and we have already implemented the first monitoring of the plan, and 53% of the actions included in the plan have already been implemented or are being implemented. The main aims of the SAMP are to, reduce private vehicle traffic and improve active mobility, redesign the public transport, increase intermodality, increase the impact on environment and reduce costs and make public transport more accessible for all citizens. This is just a very simple list of activities, of initiatives we do, and we try as much as possible to integrate different initiatives, different actions, and give citizens the possibility to choose the most suitable way of moving around the city. Cycling, sharing systems, public transport, and we also work a lot with citizens and the private sector. We develop many participation processes, supported also by communication, of course. We work with schools to in project on education to sustainable mobility, but also school streets that have been implemented, that are being implemented this year. We also work on parking policy, on data monitoring to support within our strategies. So we try to do as much as possible to build a sustainable and thriving city. So also we try to improve public spaces. This is one of the biggest projects we are implementing right now. We are gradually implementing the low emission zone. The low emission zone in the city. So we are extending the restricted access regulation from the city center to the whole urban area within the ring road surrounding the city. So now I would like to give you a bit more of information about the two initiatives, which I think are of interest to other cities. The first is the network of mobility managers coordinated by the city of Parma. Well, the aim is to bring about a change, a permanent structural change in mobility behavior, home to work in the urban area. So the city is coordinating a network of 38 mobility managers of public and private organizations that have at least 100 staff. This is following a national regulation concerning all cities in Italy. So in the network, there is the University of Parma, the hospital, the health authority, big enterprises and medium companies in Parma. So we coordinate the network, we supervise the travel plans prepared by the mobility managers, and what are the activities of the network and the benefits for the members. The members can access to capacity building events. We develop a common methodology and common tools for the questionnaire to employees that the mobility managers have to collect information on the mobility behaviors and needs of the employees, and it is the basis for the preparation of the travel plans. We, as a network, we can also implement a system of incentives to the enterprises, to the organizations, and we can improve the monitoring of data at city level, and it is a good initiative for the coordination of urban strategies and initiatives for sustainable mobility. So what I'm going very quickly through these slides. They've been prepared by one of our mobility managers of a private hospital in Parma. The mobility manager is the role responsible for improving efficiency in the companies, increase welfare, the reputation, and mitigate the negative externalities of the organization. As such, a mobility manager has many functions and objectives. They have to process data, to plan, to implement initiatives and programs, to regularly monitor the actions. They have to find and manage funding. They have to identify and use the right digital media. And they have to be also expert in communication and in relation, both internally and externally of the company. They have to promote their role and their initiatives. So what kind of initiatives the mobility managers of our network implement? Well, they liaise with the public transport company to improve the bus lines and the timetables. They provide incentives for active mobility, public transport or cycling, carpooling. They promote work from home when it is feasible. They install electric charging station in their premises, and they implement communication campaigns. The second initiative, so the network of a mobility manager is a good example of cooperation between public and private in the city. The second initiative, the second example, is the Bike to Work project. Well, Parma is, we can say that it is a bike city. We use the bike a lot. The city is flat. Every child in the city has a bike. And we use bike in the free time during the weekend, but it is not enough to get a positive impact on the sustainability of the city. So the Bike to Work has been designed to improve the cycling to work. And it is integrated with other initiatives of the city, the extension and improvement of cycling infrastructure, bike paths and bike lanes, the design of priority to bikes in crossroads in the city, and new bike parking to promote intermodality. So Bike to Work is a system, is a very simple initiative, is a system of incentives to encourage active travel between home and work instead of private cars. It started 2 years ago, and we have already implemented the 2 initiatives, and then we are now preparing the 3rd edition. It is based on an agreement between the regional authority providing the money, the funding for incentives, the local authority that is organizing the initiative, the enterprises, and the employees. So an employee cannot participate to the project alone. Employees have to participate through the enterprises. So it is a way to involve as many organizations, public and private, and as many employees as possible. So we provide incentives, 20 cents of euro per each kilometer, for a maximum of 50 euro per month per employee. And we also provide a reduction of the price of the bike sharing yearly pass, and a reduction of the ticket for the bike parkings in the city. So the phases of the initiative are 4. The first phase is the municipality publishes an expression of interest for all public and private organizations interested in participating. Then there is the signing of an agreement between the municipality and the organizations participating in the Bike to Work project. After that, the employees can start biking to work. And then there is the monitoring phase of the Bike to Work by a very simple app. What we monitor is the use of the bike to work, not during the free time or during the weekend. Some numbers and some results. As you can see, the number of organizations participating in the project has increased. 14 first edition, 25. The third edition, we have already 40 organizations as of today, but the number is increasing, which is very encouraging. And in the first two editions, we have provided incentives for 55,000 euros, and the kilometers traveled to work have been 200,000, more than 200,000 kilometers, and more than 600 participants, including employees of the municipality of Parma. So it is a systemic action. Any employee can participate, no matter if full-time, part-time, temporary or permanent. It is based on a commitment of the municipality, enterprises, and any organization signing the agreement. Well, of course, you can use any type of bike for the initiative. And as I said, it is only from home to work travel, because that's what we want to improve. And that's what the way, the behavior we want to change. It is supported by a wide communication. We did videos, but also by posters, press releases, highlighting the benefits of cycling to work. If you go to work, you do a good job. That's we claim. Why it is a good job? Because it gives you energy for working better. It improves your health. If you cycle, you are happy. And during COVID time, it is a safe way to move around the city. You reduce pollution, and also you save money, not only because you receive an incentive, but also because you reduce the cost of using a car. But that's all. Yeah, I will share with you the slides in case you want to see the short video supporting the initiative. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It was really interesting to have also the point of view of Parma and all the great initiatives that you were doing. So now that we finished the presentations, if you want, you can ask questions in the Q&A, in the chat. Just tell me directly if you have any doubts. But in the meantime, I wanted to ask questions to all of you panelists to know a bit your point of view about the main challenges and resistance that you faced in your experience implementing these kinds of campaigns, because as you all mentioned, changing behaviors is not an easy job. And I imagine that some of the work that you did was easier and other was more challenging. So I wanted to hear about your experience in this aspect. So if you can tell me your experience on that. I don't know who wants to start answering this question.
Patrizia, well, what we can say from Parma is that change takes time, of course. And the Bike to Work initiative is meant as a temporary initiative to make people experiment. What does it mean to go to work by bike, to experiment in the benefits they can get, and above all, experiment that it is feasible to you to bike to work. We also learned that we have to give as many opportunities, many possibilities to travel around the city to people according to their needs. So there's no solution that fits all, of course. But we have tried to introduce many different ways of moving around the city. So we are not closing the city to cars, but we are trying to enhance active mobility and permit the use of the car only when it is really necessary. We are supporting the use of low emission cars and vehicles, including buses, of course.
If you go the other way around, now but for me, just when we did this kind of implementation, of course, we noticed that it's about being close. The services need to be close to the citizens where they live, where they work, of course, and then also time, the time consumption of each travel mode is essential. But the main maybe barriers for us is that we need to use the land we have in the city for other things than have parking spots for car. Also, we need to use it for built environment, for parks, for green areas, and of course, when we do this kind of changes, when we are reducing car parking spots, we get also those who are not in favor of that kind of planning and implementation. So it has to go hand in hand. I mean, this is interrupting people's everyday kind of habits they have today, and we're trying to make that a smoother ride by implementing these other solutions. But yeah, so we are quite humble on that. But I think working with parking spots and reducing those is kind of the key mechanism for also driving the change, but it's not always popular to do that. So you have to have good reasons and good kind of understanding and trying to deal with that. So we have faced quite a lot of that kind of issues and targeting every day, like how do we do this, implementate this kind of solutions. So it's about reducing, as Patricia said, also that it's not just to implement new biking paths. We have to also to reduce that is polluting and making CO2 emissions. So yeah.
I would say for me, at the beginning, I thought it was going to be the interest of businesses, but I was surprised how people that were working decision-making positions at regarding to environmental responsibility or to human resources really understood this, even though they came from like very different sectors, like banking, or we had an energy company that just left the country, so it's not there anymore. So that was not, surprisingly, that was not a barrier, but the barrier was actually to sign the contracts, particularly regarding data and everything. So I think when there's not, and this is not an established thing, you need to, so we had the contracts or like to use the data and to run the survey that took like 2 months was the least time, and 6 months was the longer time. So that was something that when we planned this, we thought, okay, maybe a month. These businesses are normally more efficient than governments, at least in Mexico, in terms of bureaucracy, but it wasn't the case. So that was also time consuming and expensive. We even have to hire like expensive lawyers to help us with that. And I think the other thing that has been challenging right now in the implementation phase, it's now when we did, so some of the services are quite new, so that there's not a market to provide these services. So we had to organize these tenders that for the services that can serve many companies. So all of these companies that will provide the services have to have contracts with these companies. So you have like this administrative issue again, and we are trying to solve that. But probably we already launching 2 of the 8 companies. So I think we're finding a way also to cope with this issue.
Thank you, Gonzalo. That was really a nice intervention from all you 3. Now we have a question from Beatriz from Peru. I'm going to read it out loud to see if you can answer it. She would like to know about the financing of the initiatives. She said that in Latin America, it is one of the biggest challenge, and how do you tackle that? Also, she wants to know about the political behavior science, if it was easy to implement this in your context. So I think in this case, maybe Gonzalo, if you want to talk about Mexico, because Beatriz wonders about Latin American cases.
So I think this experiment, it's a little bit costly, but it has 3 sources of finance, of funding, I would say. So one is IDB, one is ITDP, or 4, I would say. One is a private sector foundation called Fundación Caluz. And then each company, it's also funding a proportional part of the plan, depending on the number of employees they have in the avenue. So we define also a way that this could work, which probably it's less expensive for them than having 1 person per company of doing this. And for the solutions, so since we found out that they were spending too much on parking and also other subsidies, no? like they give cars or fuel expenses to the executives, and not only executives. So since the solutions are being funded solely by translating this subsidy to the car to the solutions.
Thank you. And maybe more generally for all of you 3, if you can tell a bit more about how behavior science has influenced your work, and how was it implementing this kind of methodology in your work to drive mobility behavior change in your respective cases?
Yeah, I can maybe address it some. No, but for us, I think 2 things. It's really important to have the political goals and objectives in our, of course, why we're addressing this. So we have a consumption-based CO2 emission target from the politicians, and we also have this sustainable targets set by the leading politicians. So I mean, this is what gives us the mandate to do the work in some sense. But also, so that's one part. But also that I think this was kind of for us, been a kind of experimental way of seeing what is the public sector's role to emphasize like behavior change. What is, because we have like before built more infrastructure and built more technical kind of implementations to support this, but not working directly with the behavior science. So it was kind of this new target that we thought that it was really cost effective, and it was really supporting our other initiatives that is more investment. So I think we learned a lot of this, and we're also taking this forward after this kind of smaller projects. Yeah.
I think for us, I think the first time in ITDP that we used behavioral sciences was things related to road safety and working in school communities. So it was interesting how this idea of leaders can be really effective of something to be maintained over time. Having like these road safety advocates, not only from like the civil society organizations or organization of families of people that died in car incidents or car crashes. So since it worked a little, I would say, okay, we were inspired by a UK organization that's called Sostrans. So we thought that it might also be interesting to work in these closed environments. I'm not sure of how behavioral sciences work in transport in like an open environment. I believe that that's something very like a lot for like European cities where everything it's already so you have lots of infrastructure, people respect transit regulations and things like that. So I believe like in Latin America, maybe it's right now what it's ready to like take learnings and use behavioral sciences. It's much more for close environments. So like schools, companies, governments, rather than like yeah, general projects. I think Bogota, it's doing things like behavioral change and advertising a lot. But I don't think it's already assessed, and I don't know if it's going somewhere.
Thank you. We're almost at the end of the session, so if you have one last question, you can write it in the Q&A. Otherwise, I just wanted to ask one last question to Patricia really quickly. How did you measure actually the behavior change of the population after this great example that you told us about the public-private partnership with the bike to work incentives and the mobility manager example? So what were your methodology, or how did you measure the impacts on this behavior change?
Well, it is an ongoing process. I mean, the evaluation of the change. We are in the monitoring phase, so we know how many people participate in the initiatives of Bike to Work, how many employees, how many enterprises, and then we have the general indicators on traffic in the city and the indicators related to air monitoring. That's how we measure. We are discussing about measuring the behaviors of the individual behaviors, the individual attitude towards sustainable mobility. But that is something that we are still in the discussion phase. Because it's not so easy to implement.
I can imagine that. Thank you so much. So now we are almost at the end of our session. So I wanted to thank you, our three panelists, for sharing their really great experiences and knowledge on the topic, and for the amazing presentation that they delivered. So we're gonna share with you the presentations of our panelists so you can consult them a bit later in your free time. So the objective of today's event was to highlight the relevance of behavior change to broaden sustainable strategies and to introduce methodology to incentivize non-motorized mobility patterns. And our three panelists presented complementary viewpoints that were really interesting to promote these kind of initiatives and to analyze the results of this kind of mobility change initiative. Mobility behavior change initiative, sorry. And I think that this can be a really great opportunity for all the urban practitioners that join us today. And I hope they have been inspired by the really great case study that have been presented and are inspired in adopting similar methodologies in their own cities. I am inviting you to follow the IURC social media so you can have updates about our activities and our next webinars. I will send you, as I told you, the presentations and also the recording of this session. And I was really, really glad to count with your presence and your attention today. I hope you learned as much as I did in this session. And I hope to see you in our next webinars. We're going to have a really quick 2-minute survey at the end of the session. When I close the webinar, you're gonna see a pop-up on your screen, and we would really appreciate if you could answer it so we can improve our webinars in the future. So I hope to see you in the next events that we're gonna organize, and have a really nice Thursday.